He was selected with the first pick of the NBA draft, and experts were certain that Brad Daugherty would become the new legend of the Cleveland Cavaliers. But just a few years later, his career unexpectedly came to an end, and his name almost vanished from the memory of young fans. What actually happened? Why did a man who was prophesied a great future fail to fulfill his immense potential? And how, after the hardest failure of his life, did he manage to achieve success where absolutely no one expected it? Make sure to watch this video to the very end, because the finale of this story is just as surprising as its tragic beginning. If you enjoy, just like I do, discovering the real stories behind NBA legends, their incredible highs, tragic downfalls, and the little-known facts that are rarely talked about today, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps the channel grow and makes new videos possible. Thank you. Now, let's continue. He was picked with the first overall draft selection. He was predicted years of domination, championship glory, and a place among the greatest centers of his generation. It seemed that Brad Daugherty had a career ahead of him that every basketball player dreams of. But just a few years later, his name almost disappeared from conversations about NBA legends. Why did this happen? How did a player considered the future face of the Cleveland Cavaliers find himself forced to leave basketball right when he should have been reaching the peak of his form? Today, many young fans barely know who Brad Daugherty was. He is rarely remembered in lists of the greatest centers of the 90s, documentaries are almost never made about him, and his achievements often remain in the shadow of louder names from that era. But those who saw him play with their own eyes remember a completely different basketball player. They remember a versatile big man with a superb understanding of the court, a soft shot, excellent passing, and a basketball IQ rare for his height. Many specialists are certain that if fate had turned out differently, his name today would stand alongside the most famous stars of that time. So what went wrong? Why did one of the most promising careers of its generation end so unexpectedly? Was it the result of one fatal mistake, a chain of circumstances, or a trial that practically no one could have handled? The answers turn out to be much more complex than they might seem at first glance. This story has everything: a meteoric rise, huge expectations, bright victories, heavy trials, and a moment when a man had to make a decision that completely changed his entire life. But the most surprising thing happened after basketball was left behind. At the end of this video, you will learn how Brad Daugherty managed to start over, achieve success in a completely different world, and prove that even after the most painful loss, you can find a new pursuit that makes you move forward again. Unlike many future NBA stars, Brad Daugherty did not grow up with the sole dream of becoming a professional basketball player. In childhood, he was much more attracted to cars, engines, and everything related to machinery. He could spend hours watching mechanics work, figuring out how cars were built, and imagined his future not in crowded arenas, but next to racing tracks. For a long time, basketball remained just one of his hobbies, rather than the main meaning of life. Brad was born on October 19, 1965, in Black Mountain, North Carolina. He grew up in a calm family where great attention was paid to discipline, hard work, and respect for others. His parents did not push their son toward a sports career, preferring that he choose his own future independently. That is why no pressure or inflated expectations existed around him. Besides, Brad's basketball destiny did not unfold like that of most future superstars. He was not considered a teenage phenomenon talked about nationwide. While other talented teenagers were already gathering crowds of scouts at their games, Daugherty was only just beginning to realize how seriously he could pursue this game. His tall stature immediately stood out, but height alone is never enough to become an outstanding player. Everything changed during his school years. With each season, he grew physically stronger, felt more confident under the basket, and quickly mastered elements that many take years to practice. Coaches noted not only his abilities, but also a rare understanding of the game for a young center. Brad did not strive to be the hero of every play at any cost. He read what was happening on the court attentively, knew how to find teammates with passes, and always made decisions calmly, without unnecessary fuss. It was then that universities began to pay attention to him. Among many options, the University of North Carolina stood out in particular, one of the strongest basketball centers in the country. For the young player, this was an opportunity not just to continue his development, but to get into a system that had already nurtured many future NBA stars.
Under the guidance of legendary coach Dean Smith, Brad's abilities unfolded even further. Smith demanded not only physical preparation from his players, but also high basketball intelligence. Daugherty felt right at home in this system. He quickly became one of the team's leaders, learned to make decisions under pressure, improved his technique, and turned into one of the most promising big men in college basketball. With each new season, not only his statistics grew, but also the interest from NBA scouts. More and more specialists said that they were looking at a future #1 draft pick. Just recently, the young man had been dreaming of the world of cars, and now the largest clubs in the league were closely watching virtually every match he played. By the summer of 1986, it became finally clear. A new chapter was beginning, one that was supposed to change not only the life of Brad Daugherty himself, but also the future of one of the league's most troubled teams.
The summer of 1986 became a turning point, not just for Brad Daugherty, but for the Cleveland Cavaliers. For many years, the club had been unsuccessfully trying to climb out of the ranks of underdogs. Fans were tired of constant failures, and the management understood that the time had come to build a completely new team. They needed a player around whom a future could be created, and the choice proved obvious. In the 1986 NBA draft, Brad Daugherty was selected with the very first pick. For any young basketball player, this is the highest evaluation of his talent, but at the same time, an enormous responsibility. Now people expected not just good play from him, they expected him to become a man capable of changing the history of an entire club. Landing in Cleveland, Brad immediately found himself in the spotlight. Tall, calm, thoughtful, and surprisingly mature for his age, he quickly earned the respect of both teammates and coaches. Already in his debut season, he proved that he was capable of playing against the league's best centers and not getting lost among them. His confident moves under the basket, precise passes, and ability to make the right decisions set him apart even among more experienced players. But the main thing was not just Daugherty himself. In those years, Cleveland was gradually assembling a young and incredibly talented roster. Mark Price and Ron Harper joined the team, and later, Larry Nance and Hot Rod Williams played important roles. Together, they turned into a collective that specialists increasingly called one of the most promising in the NBA. Many were certain that the Cavaliers would soon be able to challenge the strongest teams in the Eastern Conference. Brad very quickly became the central figure of this project. His game was not built on spectacular moments for the sake of pretty headlines. He rarely tried to surprise the public with risky actions, yet almost always made the most competent decision. If defenders shifted toward him, he found an open teammate. If space appeared, he confidently finished the attack himself. His versatility made Cleveland's offense significantly more diverse and dangerous. With each new season, Daugherty improved in virtually all components of the game. His scoring grew, the number of rebounds and assists increased, and along with this, the coaching staff's trust grew as well. Fans increasingly perceived him not just as the #1 draft pick, but as a true team leader capable of leading the club to big victories. Gradually, Cleveland ceased to be a convenient opponent for favorites. The team began regularly making the playoffs, and matches involving them were perceived completely differently. Everything indicated that the best years of this collective lay ahead, and Brad Daugherty was only beginning to reveal his full, immense potential. And very soon, he would truly turn into one of the most respected centers in the entire league. By the beginning of the 90s, it became definitively clear that Cleveland had not made a mistake with its choice. Brad Daugherty had turned into one of the strongest centers in the NBA and was precisely the player around whom the entire team's game was built. He did not make loud statements, did not strive to constantly be in the center of press attention, but his impact on the court was impossible to ignore. Standing around 213 centimeters tall, Daugherty combined qualities that were rarely found among players of his position. He acted confidently with his back to the basket, possessed a soft mid-range shot, saw the court excellently, and often initiated plays with precise passes. Many coaches noted that he thought like a point guard, even though he played the center position.
Thanks to this, Cleveland's offense became less predictable, and opponents constantly had to find new ways to stop him. Statistics merely confirmed his level. From season to season, Brad stably scored around 20 points, grabbed more than 10 rebounds, and remained one of the most reliable players in the league. He was regularly invited to the NBA All-Star Game, where the world's best basketball players gathered. Such recognition cannot be obtained by accident. It meant that respect for him was felt not only by fans, but also by coaches, players, and representatives of the entire basketball industry. In those years, the Eastern Conference was going through one of the most difficult periods in its history. Virtually every season required meeting teams featuring true legends on their rosters. Under the basket, Brad opposed such masters as Patrick Ewing, Hakeem Olajuwon, David Robinson, and other outstanding big men of his era.
These meetings required not only physical strength, but immense endurance, because every mistake could decide the outcome of a match. Meanwhile, Cleveland continued to progress. The team regularly reached the playoffs and was increasingly perceived as a real threat to the conference's recognized leaders. Fans finally saw a club capable of fighting for the highest goals. Daugherty was the heart of this team, and his interaction with Mark Price was considered one of the most effective in the NBA. One directed the game from the perimeter, the other controlled the space under the basket, and together they created a system that was extremely difficult to handle. It seemed that this was only the beginning. Brad was at the age when most great centers reach their maximum. Experience already combined with physical power, confidence grew with each season, and many years of career still remained ahead. Everything said that his best achievements were yet to come.
Но именно тогда появились первые сигналы, на которые поначалу почти никто не обратил серьезного внимания. Небольшой физический дискомфорт. Wait, translated fully into English. But it was right then that the first signals appeared, which at first almost no one paid serious attention to. Small physical discomfort, which at first seemed like an ordinary part of a hard season, gradually turned into a problem capable of changing his entire life. Back then, no one could imagine that Brad Daugherty's real opponent was not on the other side of the court at all. At first, everything looked not too alarming. After hard matches, Brad Daugherty increasingly felt unpleasant sensations in the back area. For a professional basketball player, such problems were not considered anything unusual. A long season, constant struggle under the basket, rough collisions, and enormous load on the spine inevitably left their mark. Many players took to the court, experiencing pain, and continued to perform, considering it part of their profession. That is precisely why the first symptoms did not cause serious alarm. Brad did not want to let down the team that was fighting for high places and tried to play despite the discomfort. To fans from the side, it might have seemed that nothing special was happening. He still scored points, grabbed rebounds, and remained one of Cleveland's leaders. But outside of game episodes, the situation gradually became more and more difficult. Each new season demanded greater and greater efforts from his body. Pain no longer disappeared as quickly as before. After matches, recovery took more time, and certain movements that previously seemed familiar began to be performed with noticeable difficulty. For a center who constantly engaged in physical battles with the most powerful players in the NBA, this became a serious problem.
Doctors and specialists tried to choose a treatment that would allow him to preserve his career. Various recovery methods were used, training loads were changed, and more attention was paid to rest. However, relief proved only temporary. As soon as they returned to the usual game rhythm, the problem made itself felt again. It was especially hard to accept the fact that outwardly, Brad still looked like one of the strongest players in the league. Fans continued to expect bright play from him, partners counted on his leadership, and opponents prepared specifically for him as the main threat. Few people knew what price he had to pay for every match played. Daugherty himself never looked for excuses. He did not make loud statements and did not try to explain failures by physical problems. On the contrary, he continued to do his job as if nothing had changed. But inside, it became increasingly obvious. His body could no longer withstand the loads that previously seemed familiar.
Gradually, pain ceased to be a temporary obstacle and turned into a constant companion. Every trip onto the court was accompanied by the risk of worsening the situation even further. And then it became clear that ahead of him was not just another stage of recovery. Ahead began a struggle in which character and willpower alone were no longer sufficient. Despite all the efforts of doctors, the problem continued to progress. Brad Daugherty underwent spinal surgery and did everything possible to return to action. Rehabilitation required immense patience, but every time it seemed that the hardest part was behind him, the body made it clear once again that it would not become the same. He missed more and more games, lost his game rhythm, and understood that he was no longer capable of helping the team the way he used to. In the 1994 to 1995 season, he was able to play only a few games, and then it became obvious. Further attempts only worsened the situation. At the age of only 28, when most great centers are just reaching the peak of their careers, Daugherty faced the hardest decision of his life. Accepting the end of his career proved incredibly difficult. Just recently, Brad was considered one of the best big men in the NBA, participated in the All-Star Game 5 times, and was the symbol of the reviving Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, he had to give up the dream for which he had worked for many years. Fans understood that the club had lost not just a leader, but a player around whom the team's future was built. Many experts are still confident that if not for chronic back problems, Daugherty could have played many more bright seasons and left a much more noticeable mark in the league's history. His story became one of the most famous examples of how injuries are capable of changing the destiny even of an outstanding athlete. However, Brad did not allow this story to become his final word.
Back in childhood, he was fond of cars and motorsports, and after leaving basketball, he decided to return to his long-standing dream. Over time, he became a well-known television analyst covering NASCAR races, and then turned into the owner of his own racing team. The world that was once just a childhood hobby became his new profession. He managed to achieve respect outside of basketball as well, proving that a successful life does not end together with a sports career. Today, the name Brad Daugherty evokes mixed feelings among fans. On one hand, this is one of the best players in the history of the Cleveland Cavaliers and one of the strongest centers of his generation. On the other hand, it is a constant reminder of how fragile even the most brilliant career can be.
Sometimes, an athlete's tragedy lies not in defeats and not in a lack of talent, but in the fact that fate simply does not give them time to reveal their entire potential. That is precisely why Brad Daugherty's story continues to be remembered decades later. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to watch other stories on our channel. Links to the most interesting episodes have just appeared on the screen right now.